Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk7931. Cryptopunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we have Punk7931 joining the show today. He's a two-addy with fancy thin mohawk hair and dons a Mobro mustache. He's a lawyer, a podcast host, and entrepreneur building ArtsDao. Please welcome Anas to the show. Anas, welcome. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Mate, you're going to have to maybe start off and just give us a bit of a intro in terms of your nickname. So AnasBRB, like, one, am I saying it right, pronouncing it right? And two, how did you sort of come up with that?
Sure. So my name is Anas. It's an Arabic name. I think it means friend. But Ananas is sort of a nickname that my mom and a bunch of other folks have called me for a while. And it means pineapple in a bunch of languages, not in English, but in French. And so where I'm from Mauritius. We speak French there. And our national fruit is the pineapple. So I sort of just grabbed that. And then my last name's Burton. And so, my initials are kind of AB, and my handle on Instagram, Telegram, and Twitter, everywhere is AnasBRB. So the B there, the BRB, is sort of, I used to travel quite a bit. I lived over a bunch of places from Taiwan, Mauritius, London, and now Dubai. And so I was like a pineapple that will be right back. And so that's kind of how it got coined.
Nice. So does that mean that you're okay with pineapple on pizza then?
Actually, I am. I have no issues with that. I don't know why people
Good. Excellent.
go into a fuss about things like that.
Sounds like we can continue being friends, Anas. That's a cool story.
Thanks.
But yeah, so maybe you sound like you've got a pretty interesting background there. Like you sound like you've traveled around quite a fair bit and ended up where you sort of are. But it might be interesting just to run us through your background and how you got into sort of Web3.
Sure. So I used to be a lawyer. I mean, I still am. But so my background is I'm originally from Mauritius. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I lived there for about 18 years. So I speak Mandarin.
Wow.
Because I'm from Mauritius, I also speak French.
Wow.
I then moved to London to do my sort of degree studies. I then trained as a lawyer in London, practiced law there for 2 years, and then I moved to Dubai. The law I did was big ticket sort of M&A, corporate finance. I've done more than sort of $5 billion in kind of transactions across with major Fortune 500 companies. I then left. After that, when I moved to Dubai, I was with another law firm before I left to join checkout.com. In between this period, around 2018, I had began exploring smart contracts, given my sort of legal background, and went down the Ethereum kind of rabbit hole. 2021, I joined checkout.com as their kind of lead crypto counsel, working with a number of major exchanges that they were working on, because checkout.com are like the number one on-ramp for crypto, fiat crypto worldwide. They work with Binance, they work with Coinbase, and I was working with all those guys. And that's kind of how I went even deeper into the space, really kind of working directly in Web3. After that, we began building the community around ArtsDao. I also started a podcast that was at the time called the Crypto Shakes Podcast. It's now the ArtsDao Podcast. We raised some initial seed funding, and now we're building ArtsDao full time. I can go into that. That's a whole other thing, but I just wanted to pause there because there's a lot to potentially there.
Yeah, totally. Amazing sort of background. Just out of curiosity, like, how did your family find their way into Taiwan? That's a bit of an interesting sort of piece, right? Because being Mauritius and then living in Taiwan for like 18 years, like, how did that all come about?
Yeah, so Taiwan, my dad, he moved to Hong Kong initially, which I know that's where you are. I used to go to Hong Kong all the time. My dad moved to Hong Kong to work for his brother, at the time starting a business there. He then left Hong Kong to start his own business in Taiwan, which effectively moved tires that were being manufactured in Taiwan and kind of sold them to across Africa, places like Burkina Faso, Mali, etc. And that was actually a really big booming business, and he ended up taking a very big part of that business. And because of that, I ended up getting born in Taiwan. He ended up settling there. He met my mom in Mauritius, and then got married. We settled in Taiwan. I have 3 other brothers, all of whom were also born in Taiwan, and yeah, that's how we ended up living there for 18 years.
I know it's going to sound a little bit strange, or maybe not strange, but just a coincidence as well. I came from the tire business as well, so know the business quite well. Was it Maxis? Because I think Taiwan was Maxis, right? Yeah, but yeah, we could.
It's not. It's not Maxis. It's a different business. It's Kenda, which
Okay.
is
Yep.
based. They have a factory in China, but also in Taiwan. The major businesses run out of Taiwan.
Cool. And then you did that. You studied law. You studied in London as well, which is kind of interesting.
Well, actually, I studied finance and management, and then I did a so-called conversion degree as a
Okay,
lawyer. So
got it.
I didn't go straight into law.
Got it. But you've got like an American accent, and that you sort of
Yeah.
studied the UK as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I went to an American school in Taiwan. That's how I ended up
Got
having this
it.
kind of quasi transatlantic accent, then lived in London.
Got it. Multinational, amazing. And then was it checkout.com? Was it who you work for? Was that what they were called?
Yes, that's right.
What is that again? You sort of said it's an on ramp. Is it actually a crypto on ramp or something?
Checkout.com is it's like a Stripe for Europe and
Okay.
Middle East. They're a major player in the European and they work with a number of major merchants like Netflix, and other big brands. But when I was there, and I think it's still the case, I'm not sure now, but when I was there, they were the leading on ramp for major exchanges such as Binance, Coinbase, even Facebook. We're exploring things with them. Various other exchanges like OKX, and because I was there, and at the time this was just blowing up in early 2021, I became a lead, sort of one of the lead counsels working on that piece. They also had discussions around issuing a stable coin, which I also led. And it's through that I built a lot of relationships with various different players in the space, and of course began buying NFTs as a result.
Super interesting. So that was back in 2018, did you say?
No, that's 2021 when I joined
Okay.
Checkout. 2018 was kind of when I fell down the rabbit hole for Ethereum, just given that I was practicing law at the time as well.
Maybe talk us through that. I'm always curious to sort of hear everybody's journey into the rabbit hole. But how did you discover, I guess, crypto, and what sort of made you want to sort of jump into the rabbit hole?
I think there's 2 parts. So the first part I would say is when I was as a lawyer, I was very curious about how law could be better administered and more effectively delivered in the form of contracts. The emergence of smart contracts, when I read about them, represented to me a very interesting innovation because of how it turns anything into programmable bits. So your money becomes programmable. The way in which real estate transactions can be amended with smart contracts, loans, etc. All of this, I started going down that rabbit hole. I went into DeFi and all that stuff. Then there was also the other part, which was the inflation part. So as I was going down that rabbit hole, I've been kind of a believer in, not believer, but as sort of a hard money kind of proponent for a long time. So I used to buy gold. I still have gold, silver, all that stuff. And the prospect of Bitcoin representing a digital form of you can say gold, intrigued me. And the fact that Ethereum was also now, I mean, after its subsequent upgrades, it's now deflationary. These various things kind of pushed me down this rabbit hole significantly, I'd say. I began buying a lot of crypto and, kind of sharing my views on it with a lot of people. I started a podcast with my co-founder, Danosh, who, at the time called it Crypto Shakes podcast. Here in the Middle East, there wasn't much of a presence for this kind of discussion. We started hosting various different types of people to discuss these topics, and we grew into one of the larger podcasts here before we ended up building ArtsDao.
Awesome. There seems like there's a fair bit of action in Dubai and the Middle East, and also a few punks also out that way as well. Anas, what was your first NFT? Like, do you remember what that was?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the artists here in Dubai, her name is Gigi. She created a collection on Foundation, and because I found her very intriguing, I had followed her on Instagram and then also on Twitter. I picked it up. It was a very interesting piece because it came with a kind of redemption. Like you bought the piece and it was redeemable for a physical form in some way. And I got like a pillow with that NFT imprinted on it. And yeah, that's the first one I picked up. It was for I think 0.05 ETH or something, and it was really cool.
When was that? Like, how long ago was that?
That was early 2021,
So
in the very
okay,
beginning, around I'd say March or something.
so still the peak of the bull market. So still a lot of activity happening around then.
I think this was right before Beeple sold his piece.
Yeah, I remember that time. And then what was it for NFTs that sort of caught your attention, piqued your attention? Like, you bought that first NFT, and was it sort of an easy concept for you to get your head around and go deeper with, or was it just experimental at the time?
For me, I'd learned about it. So before I bought that, I was familiar with Axie Infinity and the CryptoKitties, but I had not really explored it in depth. But to me, the concept of provenance on chain and revolutionizing how creators can create value through NFTs without having a kind of intermediary. Those were all concepts that intrigued me, right? So DeFi, for example, removes the need for an intermediary in many ways using smart contracts. That's great. Trustless protocols allowing people to trade between each other without a banking institution in the middle. It's very, very unique. NFTs also represented something like that, where in many ways you are removing the need for a curator or art gallery when it comes to that. And then there's all the other things that I found very intriguing, possibly, the issuance of tickets through NFTs, the issuance of invoices, various other types of even real estate. So I began, given my legal background, right, I began to look at the blockchain as a type of new legal system for the internet. And NFTs are effectively just title deeds for different types of agreements, contracts, or deeds that is on this new legal system for the internet, the blockchain. So all of that intrigued me, and I went very deep into it as a result, exploring DAOs, buying a lot of different types of NFTs now, and then it's what led to me ultimately to go towards building ArtsDao.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? What was the, I guess, the inspiration behind ArtsDao, and what is it, and maybe just give us a bit more insight about ArtsDao.
Yeah, sure. First, I just wanted to acknowledge the punk that I'm using on my as my PFP on Twitter. That's not owned by me; it's owned by ArtsDao. And ArtsDao, effectively, we have built what I believe is now the largest Web3 community in the Middle East. There isn't a very, very large community like in the US, but when we started building this community, there wasn't anyone to kind of bring these guys together. So myself, Danosh, Rahim, also Maria, Zayan, Christelle, who are all kind of core members of, kind of the founders of ArtsDao. How we came into being is we started off in early 2021. Actually, this was late 2021 at this point, having meetups. And we had this first meetup. It was just like 10 people. All of us were a mixture of artists, builders, creators. And we were like, wow, we are the NFT space in Dubai, 10 people. And we sort of thought, hey, there might be more people around here, right? So why don't we form a WhatsApp group and maybe create a Discord and see if we can find other people. We did that, and eventually we grew very aggressively because at the same time the space was booming. We grew from 10 people to 100 people in 3 months in that WhatsApp group. We started hosting bigger ticket events. So we wanted to host small events throughout, like little meetups, but those meetups quickly became very big because we had a lot of people. And they started getting sponsored by different types of NFT projects. We had our first one in a cool private members club in Dubai, and it was a debauched kind of experience because it was, Ethereum was at 4K and everything was going mental at the time. We started hosting yachts after that. We started growing even bigger. There were people who said, hey, let's throw a yacht party. So we partnered with another NFT project in doing that. At this point, we had brought a bunch of punks into the community, Bored Ape Yacht Club minters, various other, folks who had collected art blocks, and we began to grow even more. And then we just said, look, people love this. We should, the WhatsApp group and the Discord was generating a lot of alpha because there were really cool people in that WhatsApp group. People who are like OGs now, James Booth, who is one of the top 10 traders in the world. Folks like Barthasian, who has like 15,000 NFTs, is sort of very, very influential folk. We have a lot of guys like that in the community. And from there, Artifact then visited. We hosted a yacht party with them. We did one with Doodles when the founder of Doodles came as well. We had an ArtsDao X Doodles yacht. Gary V visited. We hosted him in a private gathering with the ArtsDao community at a private members club alongside Ripple. And we started just doing a lot of this stuff. And at this point, we had grown very aggressively. And I think around June of last year, we then decided, let's create a DAO that brings these communities together. Eternal Gates was then created. So Eternal Gates is a play on words on Ethereum and Eternal. The collection is created by Christelle Bashara, who is one of the first NFT artists out here in the Middle East, and also the first person to kind of organize the meetup. So our initial 10-person meetup was at her studio. We created this collection with her. The money raised about 1.5, 1.7 million at the time in Ethereum. It was about 700 plus ETH. And the idea very much was this part of the money would go to company, which ArtsDao Labs, 20%, and 80% of the money goes into a DAO to invest in NFTs for the benefit of all members of the DAO. We have about 730 members now who are members of the DAO, but we also have a fairly large community in terms of folks who come to our meetups and our gatherings and our events that we continue to host on a monthly, weekly basis. Now, the ArtsDao Treasury owns the Punk in question that you have I'm using as a PFP. Anyone in the community can use the assets in the ArtsDao Treasury as their PFPs. For us, this was a way to help give people a more accessible way to access NFTs because a lot of these assets were quite expensive. But also we thought, as a community, we can look to acquire really cool assets to bring long-term economic value to everyone. We have an ape, we have a squiggle, we have a proof collective pass, we have moonbirds. We have basically every blue chip NFT out there in the ArtsDao Treasury. And we're continuing to acquire more. Our ape is staked and it's earning kind of ape coin for the benefit of all members of the DAO. Right now, what we're doing is we're delivering ArtsDao Fest, which is happening next week, Saturday. This is the first Web3 festival out here in the Middle East. We're expecting about 2,000 people with sponsors like Ledger, the Pudgy Penguins, On-Chain Monkey, and various other projects from Japan and the US. Again, what we're doing here is we're looking to lead Web3 adoption out here in the Middle East. There isn't another real player doing this. So we felt, look, why don't we take the lead here and do our best to kind of teach people about Web3, grow the community even more, and continue to welcome various members from all over the world. If they're coming to Dubai, right, they've got this NFT community they can turn to and connect with really cool people. So that's it in a nutshell. Apologies if that was like a long tirade.
No, it's super interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you sort of covered there, but I think it's a pretty cool concept to basically bring people together and collect art, and also in real life events to really try and propagate more people into, I guess, the Web3 NFT space, man. So kudos to you. So, and the Arts Fest next week that you were talking about, like, what's the format going to be like? Is it just going to be at like a venue, drinks, parties? Will there be like performances or anything like that? Like, how are you sort of structuring that up?
So ArtsDao Fest, like I said, is a festival. So think of it as like a music festival meets kind of Art Basel with our own kind of flavoring touch. We've effectively booked this entire hotel, the 25H Hotel, which is a stunning, iconic spot in the business district, the Dubai International Financial Center. It's a really, really cool spot. And what we're doing there is we've got various different types of activations happening. What we want to do is help everyday folks and our community understand the power of Web3. Doing this, there'll be different types of activations happening with our different sponsors. There'll be a treasure hunt. Each of these treasure hunt activations give out POAPs. Accumulating these POAPs allow people to win bounties at the end of the festival, which are obviously going to be NFTs, including some Eternal Gates. There'll be a little Pudgy. There'll be some other NFTs being contributed by sponsors. But the key point there is to show the power of how NFTs can work in real life setting. So some activations that we have, or let's say the Pudgy Penguins, they're giving out ice cream there. So if you buy an ice cream, you get a POAP. On-Chain Monkey are taking over the bar. They're going to do like a banana bar. There'll be a game that you can play where 300 people at the event will receive free drinks if they do an exchange of tokens that will be distributed at the event. I won't go into detail, but there are various different types of little games and activations like this, allowing the brand to kind of express themselves. Ledger doing like a workshop on security, and they have activations around their products, et cetera, et cetera. There will be performances as well. So we have gone with a policy of no panels, except one happening in a private spot, just with Ledger. But that's going to be quite educational, focused on security. But the entire event, nobody wants to listen to people speak from what we've gathered. So we've just gone with having full on performances. So we have a beatboxer, we have a Bored Ape DJ, an actual kind of DJ out here who wears a Bored Ape whenever he DJs. We have an auction potentially happening. We have various different types of shows. We have different types of food experiences. Like I said, it's the intention is to show the culture, right? An exploration of internet culture, digital art, and obviously the technology that captures it all together.
No, that's super cool, man. Hopefully, I can try and find a way to make it out to one of these events. I'm just looking at the photos now.
Please do.
They're looking like you're having a really great time out there. So, no, that's really cool. And I guess, this is sort of a unique PunkCast in the sense that I guess you're speaking on behalf of the DAO. So, the questions that I'll probably ask you will probably be a bit more focused around, it will be interesting to sort of see how the DAO made the decisions around selecting the CryptoPunk and everything else. So
Sure.
I think it'll be a good experiment for us as well. So maybe we'll start off with that. Then, with this particular punk, I think it was bought last June, right? So I'm just having a look at the transaction history here.
Correct.
So 20th of June last year.
Yes.
Walk us through the process. Like, how did you guys come up with wanting to buy a punk, and why this punk and why punks basically? Like, what was the discussion internally within that DAO?
So with the DAO, we always knew we had to get a punk because punks are obviously instrumental to the entire history of NFTs, right? They were issued for free and now they are an icon. They have, what I love about punks is there's no kind of company really behind them, even though they're owned, the IP is owned by Yuga Labs. There's no kind of game or whatever being built around them. There's simply art and simply a function of history. And so the value proposition there is very important, right? Having a punk in the DAO, there's actually, we were thinking about acquiring more punks. But at that time, the DAO voted in favor of acquiring it because it was at a decent price at the time. It was, I don't know, 60 ETH or something. And, the bear had just hit. It was just an opportune moment to take that punk. So we did. We liked the look of the Mohawk. Also, the features made it very kind of easy to kind of, it's for example, it hasn't got clown eyes, or it hasn't got traits that make it maybe kind of undesirable from an aesthetic perspective. The communities felt this was a cool punk to have in the DAO. So we went ahead and picked it up, and yeah, it's been, people love the punk.
Yeah, it's pretty clean. He's got the thin mohawk and the mustache, just like me. So I'm a big fan of it.
Yes.
Cool. So you guys have only got one punk in the DAO, I see, and I think you've got a Bored Ape as well, right?
Yeah, we have an ape, we have a squiggle, we have a proof pass, we have CloneX, a number of different types of NFTs.
Cool. And I guess, with the DAO, are you guys looking to pick up more punks? And I guess if you could, which would be your favorite traits that you'd be looking at?
From a traits perspective, I'm not too sure, but we definitely wouldn't be going for, I think the DAO likes to go for things that have a decent amount of liquidity. So something probably close to the floor, rather than something quite rare, because we do want to be able to liquidate and move the positions relatively easily if we need to. We are discussing right now buying another punk because we're endlessly bullish on not just the community in the punks ecosystem, but just the history of it from a long-term perspective. Nobody can sort of look at punks and say, right, these guys are going to zero or irrelevant. It's hard to say that because the history behind them, the folks who already own them, and the culture that is built around them. So, for example, in the punks chat on Telegram, it's just so significant, right? And that itself creates its own intellectual property around it that makes it hold value long term.
Completely agree. Yeah, hopefully you guys can pick up more punks. Yeah, I'm just having a look at all the other stuff you've been collecting as well. So you've got the currency in there, you got some other side stuff as well. Okay, that's cool. So from the DAO's perspective as well, like when you're looking at, I guess, a bit of a strategy for the DAO, are you sort of long-term holders, or are you sort of looking to, exit when there's an opportune time? Like, I mean, I'm always interested about DAOs and the decision-making process, right? Because I'm in a couple myself, and I always find coming to consensus is always a really tricky thing, and getting engagement from a lot of DAO members is a tricky thing, right? Like, how are you guys sort of navigating through that?
Yes, correct. So we solved this in a very unique way. We had tested Snapshot, and when we did it, only about 60 people from the DAO participated. Noting that we have about 700, at the time we had about 600 members, but let's say, that's really like if we have only 60 people attending, that's 10% of the DAO. It just wasn't really great seeing. I mean, it's not that it wasn't great. It's just participation in even politics in the real world is low, right? And if you're expecting people to also have to connect their wallet and vote on Snapshot, you're never going to make moves very quickly. So what we decided internally at the DAO is we have this so-called Jedi Council that effectively leads the deployment of capital of the DAO. These are members initially appointed, but now also kind of elected in the sort of leaders in the community who so there's 17 of them. And we have like an internal rule book around this as well. These Jedi Council members include some influential folks in the community and the space more generally. And they then set aside decisions. So proposals can be made from the community, but then voting happens within the Jedi Council. This allows us to move very quickly, right? So, for example, if we need to acquire X asset because there's a proposal for it and there's good reasoning behind it, we have like two parts. We have like a so-called the general voting procedure, and then we also have a so-called de minimis voting procedure, which comes from legal. It means like when something is insignificant in some way. So any asset purchase below 5 ETH, we consider that to be de minimis. With de minimis, we have a quorum of only 5 members, right? Yeah, 5 members. And if we have a majority in favor, we execute that de minimis vote. For a general sort of acquisition in excess of 5 ETH, the general rules apply. And there, out of the 17 members, we would require a quorum of 8 and then a majority in favor. Now, there's additional rules that apply when you want to acquire or sell a big ticket asset that represents, let's say, 30 to 40% of the DAO's treasury or existing assets. At that point, we would need unanimous consent of the entire Jedi Council and potentially the entire community. At times where there is a deadlock between the Jedi Council, let's say out of the whole members, it's 50-50 completely split, we take it back to the community and say, look, we need to do this on Snapshot to make it work. And yeah, that's how it's been operating so far. It's kind of a novel way of doing it, but it's been working for us.
Oh, nice. I think that actually sounds pretty good. I think that was maybe there's something I can look at incorporating into some of the DAOs I'm participating in, because that's always a bit of a challenge. I mean, things are getting passed with very low participation, and just not sure whether or not there's enough eyeballs getting over it. But no, that's super cool. And then I guess from the DAO's perspective as well, like, are you guys like eyeing any particular collections other than punks? And I guess like what's the mandate and the general thesis for what you will acquire over the time?
There is a view that we would like to acquire assets that, again, bring long-term economic value to the DAO, its members, and its community and brand. Also, we're not going to lie, we want to make a financial return with the view of, let's say, selling various aspects of the assets in the future and delivering, let's say, a return for members of the DAO. Now, the general thesis has been to, right now, what we've done so far is acquire various different types of access points to the top communities, just to give a nice diversified kind of portfolio holding. That hasn't always worked out perfectly, right? So we did acquire Moonbirds, for example, at 20 ETH, and it's sad to see it crumble now to 6. This is part of being in the space, right? The way that certain ecosystems evolve, you have no really control over how that changes. And at the time, the thesis was this 20 ETH investment could easily move up to 30, 40 if we, were assuming that Moonbirds might have a very bullish potential. There were various members at the time who felt, things change, right? The meta changes at the DAO. So far, what we've been discussing, some of the talks has been, I even proposed, and no one's really, some people have opposed this, but I've said, look, we should even consider selling a lot of the things in the treasury and just having punks, squiggles, and fidenzas, because these 3 assets are almost not capable of being really affected by a team or a kind of other kind of centralized party. Like a lot of these other assets are potentially securities under the SEC, whereas punks, fidenzas, squiggles, these are really just art. They're not going to be securities in any way. So the risk with those are kind of really low. Some people have said, like, yes, we could do that, but it's kind of a boring play and, it's not very exciting. Other members also say, look, having access to all these different types of communities has brought different types of opportunities, such as new members attending and becoming members of ArtsDao from those communities, also bringing them here to Dubai or whatever, doing partnerships with them. We're exploring, like when I say bringing long-term economic value to the DAO, I mean that in not just financial terms, I mean that in sort of branding terms, in terms of individually bringing value to certain members. These are the things that are being kind of considered.
No, totally. And I could sort of see that, the existing collection that you have, I think it's a signal of the quality of assets that you have, gives you access and credibility in the Web3 space, right? So, you spoke about Chromies and Punks and also Fidens as well. I mean, that would give you a lot of brand recognition already and authenticity in the space as well, right? So, yeah, so I completely understand that. And then I guess when you're looking across the Twitter space, do you have like a favorite punk personality that comes to mind?
I'm a big fan of 6529. He had an exhibition here at Art Dubai this past week. I've found his threads and what he's done for the space to be very, very positive. I like his thoughtful perspective. I like how he's also very much driven towards education. I'd say he's a very, very good leader right now, or thought leader within the space.
Yeah, I think that's the general response for most punks on the PunkCast. 6529 is always a really
Pretty
big
hard
favorite.
to it's pretty hard to kind of find an alternative to him.
And then I'm just going to ask you a few questions around punk culture. So I'm not sure how deep you are to some of these topics. So you can either just say thumbs up or thumbs down and we can move on, or if you've got a view, feel free to sort of speak your mind. So the very first question is, what are your views on V1 punks?
Okay, V1 punks. I know Hemba, who's here in Dubai as well, and have had a lot of chats with him about this topic. I also did a Twitter space on V1 punks with the punks community last year about it. So what I'll say is, firstly, the V1 punks are obviously important to the history of CryptoPunks. Now that we have V2s, the problem with this is that not a lot of people are fully aware of the story of V1s, and then how, Hemba was able to pick them up because of a flaw in the, I guess, the smart contract around V1s. Then, the team at Larva having to reissue them. This is a very important piece of history. And I think Larva, from what I understand, didn't want to really acknowledge it because it looked bad on them. But the existence of V1 punks, it challenges the V2 punks in many ways, because the V1 punks are, by some measure, the real OG punks. Now, the thing is, we have decided, or I didn't say we, but Larva Labs and the wider community now ended up sort of migrating to V2s, because it would not have been fair if V1s were kept real because of the huge acquisition that sort of happened with V1s with Hemba. I think it's fair. I think it's normal, right? Here, Larva are simply acknowledging a mistake that was made, and they're rectifying it by going to V2. My personal view, though, is that this story probably needs to be told a little more so that people understand this. So when they come into the punks culture, they're like, oh, actually V2 has this history behind it. Damn, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And they just don't just think like, oh, V2s are the original CryptoPunks. No, they're not, right? Now, the other thing is, I think it's also cool to get a V1 and a V2 together. For ArtsDao, I propose this, that we try and get the V1 version of the CryptoPunk we have. And you have the two, and it's like a really cool collectible thing to have together. I think both therefore have value, right? V1s have value, and I think their floor price is like 4 ETH or something, 5 ETH. Some of them have gone for a lot. My view there is they have a place in history and therefore should be acknowledged. I hope that, I'm curious to hear what you think of what I've said.
I think for me, I'm sort of sitting on the fence on both sides. On the one side, it's like, Lava Labs and the founders have come out and sort of said, this is the contract you should be, looking at. And on the other side is, you can't refute the fact that they were the first. V1s were the first non-chain, even though there was a bug exploit.
Exactly.
Also, at the same time, somebody could also argue that, Hemba's story isn't probably representative of, and I'd love to get Hemba on here one stage too, not to sort of call him a grifter, but he's got that reputation behind him, right? Obviously, if you're got a bag full of V1s, you've got an incentive to really try and pump it. And so for me, like if I sort of take a step back and look at the discussion as a total and the collection, this is what makes punks really unique and special, right? There is really interesting stories and a really interesting history behind it, which for me, at the end of the day, is still going to accrue value back to CryptoPunks for the long term. That's why we're going to be relevant 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, is because we're going to continue having this discussion. It's almost like, who's the greatest basketball player of all time? Is it MJ or is it, LeBron or whatever it is? And it's, different people going through different areas and have different incentives to take different views. And so for me, I love asking this question because you get punks that sit on both sides of the coin. For me, after having a chat with some punks, I went and picked up a V1 punk just because I want to be participating in that history and that culture, right?
Yeah.
Mate, this was a super fun session, getting to know you and getting to know your story. Thank you so much for your time and joining. And guys, thank you again for listening in to another episode of PunkCast. We'll wrap it up for today and we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.